Hey everybody, Paul here, coming at you with a video about a much anticipated analysis of a project for which I've aggregated a ton of sources. I want to start out by saying thank you so much to all the community members who recommended this video and for their just unwielding patience with me as I get everything together. I know this is long overdue, perhaps a month and a half or so, 2 months since I said, you know what, I'm going to get this prepared. However, I was aggregating information, getting everything sussed out in the correct format, on top of all my other duties, and this is the perfect time to make this video because a new catalyst of information surrounding the platform in question was just released that drives home everything that I've been saying for the better part of a year now. And I want to again say thank you guys so much for being so supportive during this time as we go through all this information. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. We're talking, of course, about EOS. Those of you who are paying attention with the Crypto Coffee updates, you may remember there was a period of time where we really were just analyzing a lot of news and a lot of sentiment coming out about this project. Could it be the Ethereum killer? What makes a blockchain even? Is it decentralized enough? And that's the information that came out today that serves as a catalyst. As a precursor, we're going to go through all of the sources, take them as chronologically as possible, discuss why they're relevant, and of course, share them with you below in the description. This is for doing your own research, guys. Check behind me, and of course, share any corroborating or even alternative information that may go against what you see here, because that's how we build a narrative that is as close to the truth as possible. The truth is like this transcendental thing that's always elusive, but when we share information and collaborate together, we get pretty close to it. So let's just jump right in. Research commissioned by Consensus, they've concluded that EOS is actually not a blockchain, but is rather a cloud service. Again, something I've been saying for the better part of a year. It's just a legacy database with the worst of both worlds. EOS is fundamentally the same as a centralized cloud computing architecture, client or server, without the fundamental components of a blockchain or peer-to-peer network. End quote. This is from Whiteblock, the Consensus-sponsored firm that undertook this research analyzing the EOS system and its architecture. I've said this before due to the fact that when you have 21 block producers who are delegates in a delegated proof-of-stake system, what EOS uses for consensus, you essentially have 21 individuals in control of the consensus component of the network. For a 51% attack, this means all you need is 11 entities, colluding for their own end. I changed it to entities. Why? Because it's very unclear who even owns these nodes. If one individual owns 2 nodes, then really you only need 10 people. If each individual owns 2 nodes, you only need 6 people. So you can perhaps see how this is not a very robust form of decentralization. Rather, it's more of a highly centralized, permissioned architecture, more akin to a centralized cloud computing architecture or legacy database. This is not the first analysis to drive this point home. This individual, Matteo Leibowitz, did a fantastic job. Wasn't the first individual to kind of get me skeptical of what EOS is doing and kind of dig under the hood, but definitely the most succinctly phrased article talking about what's going on with EOS and how it indeed is, as stated, a legacy database. I'm not going to read this entire article. It's relatively lengthy, but it has some, like I said, amazing points driven home in it. And as said, links below in the description. Got to do your own research. Highly recommend checking this out. Really nicely encapsulates everything up until April 30th surrounding EOS. What developed after that point in time definitely doesn't help to add any credulity to the EOS system, and we'll explain why. Like I said, we're going to go through this as chronologically as possible, but we're going to be taking it in kind of epochs. So how I have it broken down is the Ethereum days when EOS was on Ethereum doing their fundraising, their mainnet launch, and then the subsequent issues that were associated with the mainnet launch. Sprinkled in there are some people and actors involved in the EOS story, but yeah, that's pretty much the methodology we'll be taking from here on out. Let's get right into it. Don't want to lose your EOS? You need to register your tokens. What does register your tokens mean? Well, EOS, as said, was on the Ethereum network as an ERC20 asset, and when they launched their mainnet, you needed to have some corroboration mechanism to say, hey, I had this many tokens on the Ethereum network. All right, now you got your EOS tokens on the EOS mainnet. Simple enough, right? Not so much, because you need a mechanism to vet that. Excuse me. Essentially what they did was they created a mechanism, or rather, EOS Block 1 didn't really create the mechanism. They didn't create anything. They simply said, being a community project, someone will create something that allows users to register their tokens. That way it's done in a decentralized manner. To register your tokens, you need to input your private keys. Perhaps you can begin to see the incentive for malicious actors to in turn create fake registry. Like it's places where you could register your ERC20 EOS tokens, and then, oh yeah, this is fine, just go ahead and input your private keys, no big deal. And this affected a lot of individuals. A lot of users lost their funds simply due to the fact that malicious actors were utilizing this very opaque situation. Not great. And the price definitely was affected. EOS at $15, lol. But yeah, it crashed spectacularly due to the fact that there was a lot of opaqueness surrounding the voting. Not only voting, but getting your tokens registered. This is the voting mayhem, which is another subsequent issue before everything was launched. But suffice to say, it was a disaster to get everything put into order in that way. Now, voting is what occurred when the block producers needed to be selected. These would be the 21 individuals that we mentioned previously who would be dealing with consensus on the network. Individuals would use their EOS tokens to vote for the block producers they saw as most favorable for the network, the best block producers that would lead to the best resiliency and decentralized architecture possible. However, voting weight and schematic really wrecked the what was supposed to be the democratic component of the EOS system. After all, one thing Dan Lammer seemed to fail to learn from BitShares is that incentive to vote increases proportionally to amount of weight in the system. Said another way, if I have 0.000001% of all tokens, I'm not going to be very heavily incentivized to spend the time it takes to vote for various proposals on the network. However, if I own 10% of all of the network, I am very heavily incentivized to participate in the network to ensure that it is the most robust and active network possible because of my investment in the network. So this leads to an issue. Not many people hold a huge amount of tokens. It's the Pareto principle. 80% of tokens are controlled by roughly 20% of the people. That's just Pareto principle. In any distribution, you tend to see that. It's not 100% of the time true, but you tend to see that. This means that you're going to have a disproportionate incentive mechanism for people who hold a disproportionate amount of tokens to vote, meaning that it is a oligarchy, not a democracy. So EOS crashed over this realization. The voting issues raises centralization concerns because, after all, this entire voting debacle, we haven't even said yet that EOS New York was the name of the delegate. EOS New York ran the whole voting thing. Literally, they were the monopoly on voting. They controlled the portal through which individuals voted. Even if we assume no malicious intent, this is a horribly centralized, literally as centralized as can possibly be, point of failure for voting on the EOS network. So there's no real way to know if the 15% of votes out of 100% of tokens that was achieved, if that was even legitimate. Again, we're innocent until proven guilty. That's what we're really trying to drive home here. But the fact that that concern can even be raised goes to show that this is not a very robust system. The fact that one individual controlled, or one entity rather, controlled the entire voting, the counting of the votes, it definitely is not a good vector of centralization for what is supposed to be a distributed system. So, moving along, EOS did produce its first block, but votes were not so decentralized. So as said before, not only was voting controlled by one entity, EOS New York, but the concentration of voting power was very suspicious as well. Here's a chart. You can see the big chunks of blue. That is smaller voters, but over to the left-hand side, you see, actually, this is left for you guys, the webcam. But yeah, these are all one entity. So these orange bars, one entity. Look how much they were able to spread their votes around. These light blue bars, all one entity. Pink bar, all one entity. And these little tiny slivers, itty bitty 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 ones, those are what would be considered whales in the EOS network. Just simply because, again, the Pareto principle. These are still big accounts. These little tiny chartreuse sliver there, that's a big account, but it's never going to be the same as block one. And Block 1 did vote in these elections, by the way. It's never going to be as large as Bitfinex. It's never going to be as large as Huobi. And again, going back to what I said before, what if one entity controls multiple nodes? Well, given the spread of votes, it is very possible that maybe the Chinese nodes voted for one another. That's something that actually happened. Actually, 40-something% of all EOS nodes are now located in China. Saw that information this morning. The level of collusion possible due to the metrics in the system, the way the system is created. It's a fundamentally flawed system based on human incentives. That's something that I can't drive home enough. All the economy is just human action. People doing people stuff, trading with one another, talking smack, grabbing some beers and pizza. It's what we do. So with that said, if incentives are not properly balanced, then it's going to create all kinds of asymmetries in a network that eventually erodes the robustness due to the incentives present. So you can see here, that's exactly what happened during voting. Not only that, Vice Ratings drove home that Bitfinex may very well be using their own individual traders' tokens to vote itself in as a block producer. Due to the opaque nature of block production in the EOS system, there's no way to corroborate this. Again, a distributed system with a lack of auditability to corroborate whether or not one of the main forces in said system is doing something potentially malicious. Not very robust. Very centralized. No bueno. And Charlie Lee, good guy, like him pretty well. I like his chicken thing. Looking good. He, sorry, I was kind of off topic. Basically, what he drew attention to is that after raising $4 billion, they being EOS decided to pay $10K per major bug identified 2 days before mainnet launch, perhaps showing that EOS as a team, Block One, the company behind it, was maybe scrambling to get a lot of these mainnet bugs worked out of the protocol before final release, just 48 hours before debut. Definitely something sketchy. Moving along, I never know how to say his last name. Nick Szabo? Sorry, Nick. Nick, super cool guy, really big in the cryptocurrency space. He drew attention to the EOS Constitution. Now, the EOS Constitution is an issue we haven't delved into yet. The EOS Constitution is what governs the actual blockchain itself, not necessarily the consensus rules. That sounds really weird because you think blockchain code is law most of the time, but not so much here. We'll explain why. Here's the original thread from Panek. Fantastic write-up here, really great job. Most don't know, but every TX in the EOS every TX in EOS must include a hash of the EOS Constitution. What does this mean? This means that every time you undergo a transaction on the EOS system, you are saying, okay, I acquiesce to these terms and conditions. You are signing a contract with each transaction sent. So just keep that in mind. You are legally obligated to abide by what you're signing. That's how law works. So moving along, no lying. No user of this blockchain shall make knowingly false or misleading statements, nor statements that constitute discrimination or harassment or profit thereby. If you lie about your age anywhere ever on the internet, you are violating the EOS Constitution. 4. Voter independence. No member shall offer nor accept anything of value in exchange for a vote of any type, including for block producer candidates, amendments, or worker proposals, nor shall any member unduly influence a vote of another. Wait, where's it at? I'm not so sure about that, just based off of this information that we've seen here. So, immediately, the Constitution is not living up to its, seemingly the spirit of its implementation, because voting didn't go down like that. No owner or fiduciary. The EOS blockchain has no owner, manager, or fiduciary. It is governed by exclusively under the terms of this Constitution. Great point by Panek. He who creates the Constitution therefore governs it. Everything has an author. It goes back to human action. You cannot sterilize a system outside of human action and remove the intrinsic relation to human experience and human economy that it serves, that it's supposed to serve, basically. Yeah, but this just goes on and on, guys. I mean, just so many freaking weird stuff going on in the EOS Constitution. Here we go. Choice of law. Choice of law for disputes shall be in order of precedence this Constitution, the maxim of equity, and the laws of Malta. Meaning that the jurisdiction for EOS in terms of I guess IRL arbitration would need to be undertaken in the jurisdiction of the courts of Malta. Just kind of international law stuff. So yeah, they actually have a real legal precedent laid out in this Constitution, and you are acquiescing to it by using the EOS system with each transaction you sign. It's kind of a big deal, kind of important, you know, kind of right there in plain text, you know? And this is something Dan Larimer supports. Oh, yeah, one thing I forgot to mention. There's just so much, like I said. If you don't use your EOS tokens for 3 years, they go away. Yep, they're just taken out of your possession and are redistributed to individuals on the network. This is to prevent extreme hodling, I guess you could say, and incentivize individuals to maintain monetary velocity on the EOS chain by actively using their accounts. I think it's insane, personally, my 2 cents. It's such a stark incentive mechanism. It's like, all right, 2 years and 9 months, no big deal, you're good. But 3 years, your tokens are gone. Kaput, capiche, gone. None. They don't exist anymore. They're distributed. They're no longer in your possession. And this is something Dan Larimer is cool with. Okay, now I'm going to break here and we're going to go ahead into part 2. A lot of information. Bear with me, guys. Thanks so much for watching thus far. See you in part 2.